Welcome to ComfortTV.channel news, bringing you verified and balanced news from Nigeria and around the world. I am Faith Kevin. Thanks for joining us. First, the headlines. Federal government conducts mapping exercise to identify out-of-school, non-literate Nigerians. ADC sets up committee to resolve leadership crisis in Abia State. Anambra 2025 LP factions clash over court order dismissing Moghalu's candidacy. INEC records over 3.5 million online voter registrations. Oil Workers Union Dangote Group Abuja meeting ends in a deadlock. On business news, kerosene, LPG, CNG exempt from 5% fuel surcharge, Presidential Tax Committee. KCH Aqua Consortium holds meeting with Abad drug market leaders. On the foreign scene, French Prime Minister ousted in Parliament confidence vote. And on sports, Nuno Espirito Santo sacked by Nottingham Forest. Now the news. The federal government is conducting a comprehensive mapping exercise to identify those who are out of school or non-literate across the country. Minister of State for Education, Professor Suwaiba Ahmed, has said the government will be able to enroll millions into literacy programs that are relevant, inclusive, and empowering. Ahmed spoke at a ministerial press briefing to mark the 58th International Literacy Day with the theme Promoting Literacy in a Digital Era. She said the goal is to achieve Sustainable Development Goals, which calls for all youth and substantial proportion of adult literacy to achieve literacy and numeracy by 2030, adding that it is not just a global target, but a national priority fully aligned with the ministerial strategic plan, which places education at the heart of Nigeria's transformation. She added that they are training facilitators, developing culturally relevant materials, and building community learning centers. But more than that, they are building hope that every Nigerian, regardless of age or background, can learn, grow, and thrive. The minister called on development partners, civil society organizations, traditional leaders, and the private sector to join it to achieve its goals. The African Democratic Congress ADC in Abia State has taken steps to address the leadership crisis in the state. A three-man investigative and disciplinary committee has been set up to look into the matter and make recommendations for an amicable resolution within 14 days of its inauguration and submit a report in accordance with the constitution of the party. The party's resolution was contained in a statement released to journalists in Owerri, the Imo State capital, by the Zonal Publicity Secretary Chilos Godsent, after an emergency meeting convened by the National Vice Chairman of ADC Southeast, Bon Unachuku, in Owerri. Dr. Uche Ede, according to the statement, is the chairman of the committee, with Choma Anyanwu as secretary and Chilos Godsent as a member. The committee, in its mandate, is expected to engage with major leaders and stakeholders, interact with factional groups, review petitions and relevant documents, and make recommendations for a resolution. According to Godsent, the party has appealed to all parties, leaders, and members in Abia State to remain calm and cooperate fully with the committee as it carries out its task. The Abia State government has announced new policies to ease financial burdens on parents and strengthen the education system, including the restriction of graduation ceremonies to only pupils and students exiting major levels of education, primary 6 and SS3 in both public and private schools. The Commissioner for Information, Prisoke Kanu, disclosed this while briefing journalists on the outcome of this week's Executive Council meeting, chaired by Governor Alex Otti in Umuahia. He explained that the decision followed consultations with stakeholders. The Commissioner for Basic and Security Education, Goodluck Ubochi, added that it was unnecessary for nursery pupils and children in lower classes to hold graduation ceremonies that compel parents to spend heavily. Another key resolution, according to Ubochi, is the separation of textbooks from workbooks. This, he said, will allow younger siblings to reuse textbooks while workbooks remain unique to each child. The government also directed parents to ensure they collect their children's basic education certificates, as many schools had complained that first school leaving certificates were often abandoned. To address this, schools have been instructed not to charge more than 2,000 naira for primary 6 certificates. Furthermore, the government made it compulsory for students enrolling for WAEC, NECO, or JAMB to present their basic education certificates. warning that no candidate will be admitted into SS3 without passing a state-organized mandatory promotion exam in SS2. A faction of the Labour Party LP in Anambra State has pledged to allow Peter Okoye, a factional chairman of the party, to enforce a federal High Court order removing George Moghalu as the candidate for the 8 November 2025 governorship election. The Okoye faction went to court to claim that their faction of LP, allegedly loyal to Senator Nenadi Usman Keteka, has been upheld by the Supreme Court and Federal High Court. A decision of the Federal High Court sitting in Enugu restrained Moghalu from parading himself as the Anambra's LP's governorship candidate. The court held that the Supreme Court judgment has not only ousted Julius Abure-led leadership from office, but also handed the reins of power to Senator Usman as the national caretaker chairman. The court's decision seemingly nullified all acts, including nominations, lists, or endorsements issued under Abure's defunct leadership. The court further barred the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) from recognizing, processing, or accepting any nomination forms or electoral documents originating from the Abure faction in Anambra. It also approved substituted service of court papers on Moghalu by pasting them at his Nnewi residence, effectively binding him to the order, emphasizing maintaining the status quo until the determination of the substantive suit. Okoye, who is the factional chairman of LP in the state, contended that the interim order came after 2 ex parte motions filed by members of the party's interim state executive committee led by himself. Okoye claimed the ruling recognizes only the faction led by him and Jerry Nubia and loyal to the recognized national caretaker leadership of Senator Nenadi Usman backed executives in the state under Chukwunolo and Nubia. He said the court's pronouncement is a victory for internal democracy and the rule of law. It underscores that no aspirant, however prominent, can impose himself on the party outside recognized structure. But when contacted, the other factional state chairman of LP, Chief Ugochukwu Eme, dismissed the suit and the position being canvassed by Peter Okoye and his group. He insisted that Moghalu remains the party's candidate. The Independent National Electoral Commission has announced that over 3.5 million Nigerians have completed online pre-registration in the ongoing nationwide continuous voter registration exercise. The update was provided in a press release issued on Monday by the National Commissioner and Chairman, Information and Voter Education Committee, Sam Olumekun. Efforts by the federal government to broker peace between the Nigerian Union of Petroleum and Natural Gas Workers (NUPENG) and the Dangote Group ended in a stalemate on Monday night, leaving the nationwide strike by oil workers unresolved. The meeting convened by the Minister of Labour and Employment, Mohammed Megari Dingyadi, brought government officials, union leaders, and representatives of the Dangote Petroleum Refinery to the negotiation table in Abuja. However, after hours of talks, no agreement was reached. The strike, which began yesterday, is rooted in NUPENG's accusation that the Dangote Group has adopted anti-labor practices by barring unionization at its refinery and seeking to dominate the oil supply chain. Labor leaders insist that these actions threaten both workers' rights and the wider economy. Addressing reporters after the talk, Dingyadi admitted the process has been broken down, but expressed optimism that progress could still be made. Speaking to journalists after the meeting, the Acting General Secretary of the Nigerian Labour Congress (NLC), Benson Ukpa, who led the NUPENG delegation, stated that the talks collapsed after the Dangote representative walked out on both the minister and the unions. He dismissed concerns that the strike would worsen the plight of ordinary Nigerians, arguing that the union's fight was in their interest. Despite the strike, fuel stations in major cities such as Lagos and Abuja remained operational, providing some relief to consumers amid concerns over fuel shortages. Industry analysts warns that if the strike persists, disruptions could escalate, potentially impacting supply chains and causing fuel scarcity outside the major urban centers. Meanwhile, government officials are reportedly negotiating with union leaders to find a resolution and end the strike. ComfortTV.channel news returns shortly with business, foreign, and sports news. Many thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back to ComfortTV.channel news. On business, the Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms Committee has clarified that the proposed 5% fuel surcharge under Nigeria's new tax laws will not apply to several household energy products. In a statement released via X, Committee Chairman Taiwo Oyedele explained that household kerosene, cooking gas, compressed natural gas, and clean or renewable energy products are exempt from the levy. The clarification followed growing concerns that the surcharge could worsen the cost of living crisis for Nigerians. The committee emphasized that the surcharge will not automatically take effect when the new tax laws commence in January 2026, but will only commence when the Minister of Finance issues an order published in the Office Gazette as stated under Chapter 7 of the Nigerian Tax Act 2025. This safeguard ensures careful consideration of timing and economic conditions before implementation. The committee complained that although savings from petrol subsidy removal can support road projects, the funds are not enough to cover Nigeria's huge and recurring infrastructure needs alongside other fiscal obligations. The Fiscal Committee added that the reform does not contradict the administration's promise of reducing taxes, noting that multiple charges such as VAT on fuel, excise tax on telecoms, and the cybersecurity levy have already been removed or suspended. On its abolition, the Tax Reforms Committee said the surcharge cannot be abolished because it was designed as a dedicated fund for road infrastructure and maintenance. The management of KCH Aqua Consortium, a construction, infrastructure and property development firm, held a meeting with the leadership of drug markets in Abuja, the commercial city of Abia State, to foster collaboration. The head of media and communications of the consortium, Chibu Nwobia, said in a statement that the meeting was called by management to inform off-takers who are major stakeholders about the approval granted it by the Abia State government for the execution of project and keep them abreast with the way forward. In his remarks at the meeting, former chairman, Pharmaceutical Society of Nigeria PSN Abia State Chapter, Chief Victor Amuta, said it was cheering news for drug marketers to be operating in a regulated environment because it confers legitimacy to their business. Amuta, however, emphasized that the federal government, through the National Agency for Foods and Drug Administration and Control, NAFDAC, is determined to end open drug market in Nigeria and urged the drug marketers to take advantage of the opportunity to align with government policy on pharmaceutical products marketing by identifying with the project. Chairman of Drug Dealers Stakeholders Group, Mr. Elvis Anoro, expressed appreciation to Governor Alex Otti for graciously providing land for the project and assured the consortium of support from his group. He noted that the provision of land by state government has rescued members of his group from incessant harassment by NAFDAC and many struggles the group faced in the effort to secure a permanent site for their operations. It will be recalled that Abia State government recently granted KCH Aqua Consortium approval in principle to execute the state-owned Coordinated Wholesale Center, CWC. In the foreign scene, France's parliament has ousted the government of Prime Minister Francois Bayrou after just 9 months in office, leaving President Emmanuel Macron scrambling to find a successor and plunging the country into a new political crisis. Bayrou, who has been in the job for 9 months, had blindsided even his allies by calling a conference vote to end a lengthy standoff over his austerity budget, which foresees almost £44 billion, $87.1 billion in estimated cost savings to reduce France's debt price. Bayrou, the first premier in the history of modern France to be ousted in a confidence vote rather than a no-confidence vote, will submit his resignation on Tuesday morning, according to a person close to him who asked not to be named. In the vote in the National Assembly, 364 deputies voted that they had no confidence in the government, while just 194 gave it their confidence. In line with Article 50 of the Constitution, the Prime Minister must submit the resignation of his government. Bayrou is the 6th Prime Minister under Macron since his 2017 election, but the 5th since 2022. Bayrou's ousting leaves the French head of state with a new domestic headache at a time when he is leading diplomatic efforts on the Ukraine war. But defending his decision to call the high-risk confidence vote, Bayrou told the National Assembly the biggest risk was not to take one, to let things continue without anything changing. Describing the debt pile as life-threatening for France, Bayrou said his government had put forward a plan so that the country could, in a few years' time, escape the inexorable tide of debt that is submerging it. Still on the foreign scene, Nepal has lifted a social media ban after it led to clashes between protesters and police that have left at least 19 people dead. Thousands of young people had forced their way into the parliament building in the capital, Kathmandu, on Monday, asking the government to lift its ban on 26 social media platforms, including Facebook, X, and YouTube, and to tackle corruption. The decision to lift the ban was made after an emergency cabinet meeting late on Monday to address the demands of Generation Z. Communications and Information Minister Prithvi Subbagarang reported. More than 100 people were injured in the protest, which also took place in towns outside the capital city. Social media platforms such as Instagram have millions of users in Nepal who rely on them for entertainment, news, and business. But the government had justified its ban implemented last week in the name of tackling fake news, hate speech, and online fraud. Young people who took to the streets on Monday said they were also protesting against what they saw as the authoritarian attitude of the government. Many held placards with slogans including "Enough is enough" and "End to corruption." One protester, Sabana Butatoki, told newsmen that the social media ban was just the reason they gathered. Another said rather than the social media ban, every other focus is on corruption. The police in Kathmandu had fired water cannons, batons, and fire and rubber bullets to disperse the protesters. Home Minister Ramesh Lekak tendered his resignation in the evening following intense criticism over his administration's use of force during the protest. On sports, Nuno Espirito Santo has been sacked by Nottingham Forest after just 3 games of the new campaign. The Portuguese led Forest into Europe last season for the first time this century, but his relations with the club hierarchy have become increasingly strained this summer. Nuno criticized Forest transfer policy publicly and admitted his rapport with owner Evangelos Marinakis was not the same as it had been last term. Nuno, who joined Forest in December 2023, also struggled to work under the new structure with former Arsenal midfielder Edu installed as global head of football. Marinakis only days ago dismissed reports of a rift between him and the manager. In a statement released at 12:15 a.m. Tuesday morning, Forest said Nottingham Forest Football Club confirms that the following recent circumstances, Nuno Espirito Santo has been relieved of his duties as the head coach. The club thanked Nuno for his contribution during a very successful era at the City Group, in particular his role at the 2024-2025 season, which will forever be remembered fondly in the history of the club. Despite bringing huge success on the pitch for the club, Marinakis and his now former manager certainly haven't always seen eye to eye. According to reports last week, club record signing Omari Hutchinson had been omitted from Forest's Europa League squad, another decision unlikely to please Nuno bosses. Forest will turn their thoughts immediately to appointing a new manager, with former Tottenham boss Postecoglou the bookie's favorite to replace Nuno. Jose Mourinho has also been linked with a role in overseas media outlets. Marinakis had long admired Fulham boss Marco Silva and Athletic Bilbao coach Ernesto Valverde, although hiring either will mean paying compensation. Nuno's final match in charge of Forest was a woeful 3-0 home defeat by West Ham before the international break, under the watchful gaze of Marinakis. Ralf Rangnick has warned he will leave Austria if they fail to qualify for the 2026 World Cup, despite his side's flawless start in Group H. He made it clear that he will resign as Austrian head coach if his side failed to qualify for the 2026 World Cup. The ex-Manchester United boss has overseen a flawless start to qualifying, with his side winning their first 3 games in Group H. However, Bosnia and Herzegovina currently top the table after 4 victories, setting up a crucial clash between the two sides in Zenica. Austria are bidding to end a World Cup drought that stretches back to 1998, and victory with a 2-goal margin on Tuesday will see them leapfrog their rivals into first place. The 67-year-old has been in charge of Austria since 2022, bringing structure and discipline to a team that have long underachieved on the international stage. His contract runs only as long as Unser Boschen remain in contention for a World Cup place, and his stance underlined the high stakes of this campaign. With stars such as David Alaba and Marcel Sabitzer leading the charge, Austria have a golden opportunity to return to the global stage. Failure, however, would not only end their hopes but also force the federation to search for a new coach at a pivotal moment. A two-goal victory against Bosnia and Herzegovina would not only take Austria top of the group but also secure a historic 4 wins from 4 at the start of the World Cup qualification. And that's our news bulletin for today. But before we go, here is a recap of our top stories. Federal government conducts mapping exercise to identify out-of-school, non-literate Nigerians. ADC sets up committee to resolve leadership crisis in Abia State. Anambra 2025 LP faction clash over court order dismissing Mogali's candidacy. INEC records over 3.5 million online voters registration. Oil Workers Union Dangote Group Abuja meeting ends in a deadlock. On business news, kerosene, LPG, CNG exempt from 5% fuel surcharge, according to the Presidential Tax Committee. In other foreign scene, French Prime Minister ousted in Parliament confidence vote. And on sports, Ralph Rangnick prepared to quit Austria. Thanks for watching. For breaking news, exclusive interviews and more, follow us online at ComfortTV.channel across all platforms. Remember to like and share our videos, subscribe to our channel and click on the notification bell so you don't miss out on any updates. I am Faith Kevin. Until next time, stay safe, stay informed.